Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. So as we enter this new year, 2022, we've got an update for you. We were originally combined and collaborating around the Shed the Shame Period podcast. And this year, we're going bigger. We are expanding the vision and mission, and it's time to shed that shit. We're going to look at all of the intersections between cyclicality, menstruation, hormonal health, and all of the different topics that could possibly interconnect with these things. And we are really excited to have you back on the journey. We had amazing episodes and guests last year, and we are so excited to bring you back more content with an expanded vision and mission this year. So buckle in, it's time for a great ride. I, of course, am Alyx Coble-Frakes, one of your co-founders, or one of the co-founders of this podcast and the founder of the Agenda Period. And we are joined by the incredible Aljolynn Sperber, the founder of Ladybox, which is just a fantastic company. If you haven't checked out your Ladybox yet, do it. I mean, check out your physical Ladybox and the Ladybox on Aljolynn's website. We have got so much amazingness for you. So thank you for coming back. Thank you for sticking with us. And thank you for helping us shed the shame in all of these areas of our lives. So Aljolynn, hello. How are you doing this year? How's it going?
I am doing well. I am feeling refreshed and recharged after taking about 2 weeks off for myself. We got snowed in here in the Pacific Northwest, which was kind of a great excuse to not see people because I went into hermit mode once December 26th hit essentially, which is when the snow fell too. So it's been so nice to have that time and space for myself to recharge after a very, very energy sucking year.
Ooh, amen to that. 2021 was a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was a dumpster fire like 2020 was, but it was a lot for me.
It was the recovery from the dumpster fire. And then they're like, but hey, we may light it on fire again in 2022. So hold on to your butts, folks. Let's strap it.
Oh goodness. Yeah, a lot did happen. And like there was in 2020 there was the hint, I'll call it a hint, or awakening that there's major disparity between women in the workplace and especially like moms in the workplace. And then it was really called out in 2021. I mean, there was like a whole big article about it. I can't remember, but earlier I think in the early half of 2021 about
Primordial Scream, I think it was called.
Yeah.
Talking about all of those challenges.
Yeah. Oh, and then how in I think it was December 2020 was the month where it was only women that got laid off in jobs because and a lot of women of color because a lot of them were in hospitality or food service, and those were the industries that were hit pretty hard. So then only women in the month of December of 2020 losing their jobs, like what the fuck. Anyway.
And I read quite a bit around what the pandemic has done in terms of career trajectory for women, setting them back millions, if not billions of dollars in terms of raises, and what those percentage points do over the course of your career, what that does over the course of your retirement. So if you haven't gotten the hint today on Shed That Shit, we are going to be talking and stripping away shame and stigma around having a great career, wanting to participate in the workforce if that's something that appeals to you, and also juggling that against the expectations of parenthood, but specifically motherhood today. So we're going to dive into those waters. So before we jump in further, Aljolynn, let's do a cycle check-in. How are you checking in with your cycle today?
So you know how like the last few months of the first season, I was just like, I don't know, I'm free ranging it. Well, the other day, okay, so I hope it's not TMI, but the other day,
it's the Shed That Shit podcast. No TMI.
Okay, so I was cleaning, and so I'll share that I don't typically wear underwear. I go commando. And so I was
Awesome.
cleaning and I like put down a certain way and I was like, my vagina smells very nice right now. I might be ovulating. So, and so I did. I stuck my finger up there and was like, I'm ovulating. But I mean, like my partner, I didn't do any practice or anything while I was ovulating, which is just fine. But yeah, I think I'm still like I'm about to hit luteal because I'm still like I've got some good energy there. So
Yeah. Maybe the first phase of luteal where you're like,
yeah,
I can do all the things, like
yeah,
some
exactly.
some luteal intensity week 1, what
Yeah.
we call the CEO energy. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. And what a cool journey. We look forward to seeing how your cycle check-ins evolve over this year as you are tapping into different facets. And again, for all the listeners, being a free range cycle person is totally normal. We are not taught about these things in the way that we should. So wherever you're coming to this knowledge, it is totally okay. You are normal, your body is normal, and we are excited to be on this journey with you. I am checking in full-fledged follicular phase. So I got my period the day after Christmas and I said, thank you. What a gift, Mother Nature. What a gift. Thank you for my Christmas present. I thought I was going to start on Christmas Day and that would have been like a great meme, but I started on the 26th. So I am just like full of energy. And, ooh, what should I do? All the things. Let's do all the things. So super excited to be recording this podcast with you. And if, as the listeners know, it's always a great, whatever phase we're in, it is a great time to be on a podcast because these different aspects of ourselves get to shine through, these different components, the way we look at problems. So we are here to champion each and every phase of the cycle with you as we continue to shed this shit all year long in 2022. So with all of the stage being set, today we are going to talk about motherhood, entrepreneurship, world of work. And Aljolynn, I would love for you to start us off with that story we touched on a little bit offline around some of the coming to grips with some of those challenges last year.
Yeah. So if you don't know, I am the founder and soon to be announced co-founder of Ladybox, an organic period subscription box that helps empower period people's lives. You get organic essential items like period products, snacks, and comfort items. And so I had a really good launch in February 2020, almost got 100 subscribers at launch, which was amazing for my first business that I've ever launched on my own with a very bootstrap budget. And then, you know, pandemic hit and I have a background in marketing. And so I leaned more into my marketing expertise to make sure that I can provide for my son and I, because yes, I have a partner now, but at that time I was partnerless and the sole provider for me and my son. So I had to make sure we were taken care of. Anyway, you fast forward to last year in 2021, and I was hoping that I would be able to shift energies to more of Ladybox, but again, like I wasn't in a place to be able to shift it. So I was doing a lot of juggling, balancing. And in terms of growth, like I felt shame that Ladybox hadn't grown so much last year in 2021. Like I actually lost a good chunk of subscribers last summer, which was kind of heartbreaking because there was some, you know, other heartbreaking stuff and trauma that, you know, occurred last July. But it's like the time that you can give and the energy you can give can be like a good chunk of evidence into what grows and what you help grow. Because like I noticed that when I was able to put more energy and time into Ladybox last year, those months did really well. And the months that I couldn't, which was 9 out of the 12 months, you know, it was sustained, I'll say. So while like, there wasn't growth, there was sustained, it was sustained. But then like you talk to people, like people are asking you when you become an entrepreneur, people are always asking you like, how's your business going? Like, and then if you have a subscription box, people are like, how many subscribers do you have now? And it's just like, can you ask me something else outside? Like, hey, how are you making time for yourself? Or like, what's bringing you life? Like, or ask me about my why I even did Ladybox. But it's so like metrics driven. And so I kind of have to come up with this rule of like, unless if you're investing in Ladybox or unless if you're giving me money in some way, I don't need to tell you how business is doing. We can talk about other stuff, but anyway, it wasn't the best year, and I had a lot of shame around that. And I've kind of like, have used my holiday break to work through that shame, because we can only do so much. And even somebody else that's like a mentor, they said like, you did what you did with Ladybox, and Ladybox is like a good product. You're a good founder. You just need help. And that's so true with like being an entrepreneur, being a woman in business, and like being career driven, and then being a mom. Because like before going into Ladybox, I was scared about making sure my son still felt like the number one priority. And what has helped me was a friend shared the advice of like, hey, why don't you just involve him in what you do? Which I did in the beginning. And then my son has expressed that he's like, I don't need to, but if you need my help every once in a while, okay, I'll help you. So I mean, he's like 13 now, and so he doesn't need me as much as he used to. So I think the timing of me launching Ladybox was like pretty good timing. And he still knows that I prioritize him. So a lot of my shame again surrounds like this other baby that I had, which is Ladybox, and not giving it the time and attention that it needed. When the pandemic hit and last year, to help it grow and thrive. But I think 2022 is going to be a really good one, because I will have more support in there. But it's hard. Like people will ask me about Ladybox, and I'm like, I don't really want to talk about it right now, because I just don't. Like it's hard sometimes.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it is freaking hard to launch things and bring new work to the world. And I think there's a lot of mythology around how we make businesses and companies and how we do work. I saw this like tweet that kind of became a meme. I don't know if you saw it. I posted on my Facebook, but it was something around like, we have this standard of productivity based around white men in the 1940s and 50s who had someone doing all of the domestic chores in their life, aka grocery shopping, cooking, cleaning, child rearing, all of these different components, and then saying, okay, your career should look like that person's career who had all of these other things taken care of based on the unpaid labor of other people. And if we go back further, from the 1940s and 50s model, we know that there is a legacy of white supremacy and slavery that allowed the accumulation of wealth and career and fortune, because like we were just robbing people of their humanity. And so when we then tried to compare that against how we should show up now and how we should participate in the world, it's completely bullshit. It is a rewriting of history. It is a whitewashing of history, and it's unattainable. And yet there's still this tremendous amount of shame and guilt that gets layered against everyone who can't live up to that standard. It's complete bullshit.
And I remember talking last year with one investor, like potential investor. Ladybox doesn't have any investors right now, but I was talking with one potential investor last year, and I was telling him the story about Ladybox, and he's very interested in it. And then he asked me why I didn't go full time with Ladybox, and I'm like, well, I'm a single mom. I need to be able to provide for my son, and so I do my consulting too. And he's like, well, a lot of investors aren't going to invest in you until you go full time on it. And I'm like, well, doesn't that sound like white privilege? He was very taken aback. He was like, because he's a white male, very nice, like kind ally, but like I could tell he was just like not ready for that response. And and then he tries to go into the like all the successful ones, they did go full time at some point. And I'm like, great, but like, were any of them ever single parents? Were any of them ever the sole providers? And any, like, there's like a lot of the back and forth, but like he's like, yeah, I guess you could say it is white privilege. And I'm like, yeah, it is. Like that's like a very privileged position to come from, of saying like, well, the good ones are able to go 100%. And I'm like, how many of you are single parents, and how many of you are women of color, or like some kind of marginalized group?
It's such a myth anyway, because what we know about venture capitalists is that like 45% of the deals are made straight off of an introduction, of a warm introduction. And so how soon in their career were they able to get funding for their company that allowed them to stay full time?
Oh yeah.
So, and obviously there are more than that, but like 45 are just like a straight off of a warm intro, which means you knew someone who knew someone with money, and they were like, you should give this person money. And then they gave you money, right? Like that is just not the world that so many marginalized groups live in, and we don't, and not operating in that way. And so as I've been building the agenda period, I still have coaching clients because I can't afford to not have money. I have to pay my bills. I have student loans. I have, all of these different components. And so when I even had a really interesting conversation today with someone, we're talking about Y Combinator, and I let them know I had applied for Y Combinator, and my company, even because they were saying to me like, oh, the agenda period, that's like one of the coolest ideas I've heard of in a long time. And I talk to founders all day, every day.
Yeah.
This is truly unique. It's like, yeah, I don't know why I didn't get accepted into YC. He's like, well, you don't have a technical co-founder. I'm like, because when we look at the history of women in tech, there aren't very many women in tech. And so if you keep ignoring all the companies based on this old playbook, we're not going to change the field. We're not going to shift the dynamic if we have all of this mythology around what it means to be successful or what it takes to do this well, even though we know emphatically that women do more with less money. We create, like when we're giving those sliver of opportunities, create a lot more, have better returns on investment, but we still have all of this bullshit to contend to. And the parenting mythology is a big one in terms of what it means to be a good parent and how that can interfere with being in a business and having a career.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if you've ever gotten any weird questions or side eyes around that combination of those two factors for yourself.
So one, everybody's always surprised to hear that I'm 38 years old. Everybody thinks I'm younger. And so then when I tell them I have a 13-year-old or like whatever age he is, they're like, wait, what? Did you have him when you were like a teenager or something? And I'm like, no, I'm 38 and I had a very good, well-traveled, well-experienced life. And so I get that a lot. And then I get the when I'm traveling for work and they learn that I'm a parent. So the thing is, like, I really don't tell people I'm a parent, because you get like you get looked at through a different lens. And so it was always like a coworker or somebody that would like bring up that I'm a parent, and I would just be like, oh, just like it kind of sucks to have that reaction of like, but you get looked at with a different lens as a woman as soon as somebody learns that you're a parent. And then I would get asked all the time, oh, well, who's watching your son? And I would just like, I would always answer as a smart ass, like, oh, I don't know. Like, I just left him. Like, he can fend for himself. And he's like either 3 or 6, at the time. So obviously he cannot fend for himself, but it was like my way of being like, I hate your question. It's stupid. Why are you asking me this? Stupid question. Stupid question. Like, do you
I
ask
feel that
men
like
that?
in my cells. I feel that in every cell of my body. It's just like so fucking annoying.
Yeah. And then they learn that like I'm a single parent, and then it's always the, oh wow, how do you do that? And I'm like, yes, it's hard to be a single parent sometimes, but it's hard being a parent in general. So don't like make me out to be a martyr or some hero. It's like I'm a parent, I love my child, and I'm doing my best to raise him, and I am doing my best to be a career driven or just entrepreneurial mindset person and make a good impact in this world. And that's that. Like, if you ask me about my son, specific questions about like, what do I love about him and what do I love to do together with him, I will gladly answer those questions. But if you ask me logistical questions about like how my son is being taken care of while I am away, don't. It's stupid. It's really stupid. Because it's like, it almost feels like they're doubting that he's being cared for while I'm away. And I'm like, he's well taken care of. Anybody that has like taken care of my son while I've traveled, I trust them wholeheartedly to like care about him and care for him. So he's in good hands. You don't need to worry about it.
Oh, like I just feel this so fucking viscerally because I found out we in 2020 we had just gotten our first kind of more institutional investment, and I found out a few months later I was pregnant with twins. And so then every conversation I had with my investor, who was super kind and well-meaning, would be like, so like 5 minutes and he'd look at me like, so like, how are you feeling? How you doing? I was like, I'm good. How are you? We're in the middle of a pandemic. Hello, how are you? He was just like, then he would like casually be like, my wife was really tired when she was pregnant. How are you feeling about everything? He'd be like, I'm good. I am tired. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Like, I don't know what you want from me. But they were like, and then as it got closer, it's like, so like, what's the plan for workload postpartum? Like, I was just like, we should not be having these conversations. If I didn't feel like I could do all of this, I wouldn't be doing it. And sorry, it looked like you had like a
sorry. I love that you could be open about it, because a lot of women or like pregnant people haven't been able to, and they have their own business, they're running it, whether you're a CEO or you're a founder and you get pregnant, people look at you differently. And some of them can't even tell people that they're pregnant until it's like very apparent that they are pregnant. I mean, my previous CEO, freaking fireball of a human, she got pregnant, but she chose to like only tell people very close to her that she was, and waited a while to let people in the industry know that she was, because she knew at the time the industry was very male dominated and very patriarchal. And so she just knew the kind of responses she would get, and the lack of confidence that she would get from potential clients or current clients just because she was pregnant. But guess what? That bitch closed way more business that year being pregnant than like probably like some of the other years, and like had to go through some other shit. And so I'm like, woman's badass. And not that like we have to be so in awe of like female CEOs and founders that like can go back to work in like a month or 2 weeks or whatever. But if they love their work and are excited to get back to work, then celebrate them on that. But that's what she did. She was just like, well, I got work to do and stuff, the company to take care of. So I have my baby is fine, and I'm going to go back to work. So here I am.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I had a
So,
baby.
yeah. I definitely, so he saw me in person and I was just
Mhm.
starting to show because I got large so fast with twins. Which is fine because our bodies are made to stretch and there is no need to bounce back. That's some other bullshit we're going to share on this podcast. I hate that phrase so much when they talk about women. But for everyone else, I had potential investor conversations the rest of that year. I didn't let anyone know. And it was all on Zoom. And so I made very clear that I was like never seen more. And I did not bring it up because I knew what people would say. And I even had a potential investor conversation 2 days before my kids were born. And I was gigantic. And so I just made sure I was like, could only be shown for me. I didn't need to stand up at all on the call and just made it really clear that this wasn't going to be a part of the conversation because I knew that energy was, he meant well, but he still had a lack of confidence based on that. That's happened since then. It happened last year. The first time I traveled without my kids, I went to a conference. I got invited to speak at a conference and they were about 6 or 7 months by that point.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, so good to see you. Where are the twins? And I was like, they're at home. Oh my God, who's taking care of them? Every single person I talked to, just like you're talking about, the logistic questions, the people I love, people who I care, who are cheering for me, who are in my corner, would still ask that question because it's so ingrained into us that women have a very specific role. In terms of child rearing, I was not breastfeeding. That was also a really big, I'm like, my boobs are of none of your concern, strangers on the street here. Like, we don't need to talk about my milk production. I am not a dairy cow. Like, we don't need to have this conversation. But it was like so concerning to people. And I got back and I asked my husband, because he also had gone in a workshop. I was like, so let me know, like, how many people of all the people you talked to asked you about like who was taking care of the babies? And he was like, nobody. Why? I was like, every single person I talked to asked me that. And it's just bullshit because everyone just assumed when he was traveling that I was taking care of the kids, but no one just assumed that when I was traveling, he was taking care of the kids. And I am partnered. No one made that assumption. Like, they have a perfectly other capable human parent that is taking care of them. Why would you assume? Why do we expect so little of men to think that they could not be there in that role? It's just, the whole thing is mind-boggling and super frustrating.
Jacked.
Totally jacked.
Yeah.
And it made me feel bad because I was enjoying myself. And then people kept bringing it up as if I should feel guilty for being away from my infants. Oh, they're so young. Like, oh my God, who's watching them? I'm just like, damn, can't you let me enjoy my night of uninterrupted sleep? I have not got a good night of sleep in the past year and a half. Can you just like,
poor thing.
Stop?
I got lucky with my son. He has always been a great sleeper. But yeah. I think the only work trip I had where I really missed my son, except for like the first time I ever traveled away, was a 10-day trip I had, a work trip that I had to Norway. And he was 3 at the time. And so that was like a big, big deal to be that, to be away from him that long. But it's like so interesting because my dad would travel months at a time. And it was just like normal for him to be away months at a time for his work. But then, like, I wonder like if he ever got asked that when he was traveling, like, oh, you have a kid? Who's watching them? I probably never got asked that.
I would
Probably
doubt
never even
not.
Thought to ask him that.
And let's be clear, like there are women who never want to leave their kids, and full-time in the home mommyhood is their jam, and that's fucking awesome. If that works for your family, if that works for you, we're here for that. We are here. If like that's so exciting. We need to shed this notion that these kind of people do this and these kind of people do that, and that's the only equation that makes sense, because that's what really feels limiting and challenging, I think, to all of us when we are shoved into these boxes and they don't always fit.
Yeah, 100%. And then, yeah, if there are even dads out there that just love being stay at home, that should be celebrated too.
Oh yeah.
Like my partner and I actually talk about that stuff because I have a feeling that like Ladybox, or whatever we're gonna call it, in the future is going to like take off here. And so we talk about like support systems as like we get busier and I get really busy. And I said to him, let's make it a goal for you to have to resign from your job by the end of 2022. And he's like, so I would just be like a stay-at-home partner and dad? And I'm like, yeah, does that sound nice? And he's like, yeah, that also sounds really weird because he's had to work his entire life, from the age of 11 even. So he's like, what do I do with time off? And I'm like, I don't know, hobbies.
Make me a sandwich. Just kidding. Yeah. Yeah. So if you could give some advice to a mom listening who maybe has started a business or wants to start a business but feels trapped in this paradigm, what would you say to them?
Involve your kids in it. I mean, I think that was the best advice I got from somebody was like, hey, involve your kids in what you do, because then they get to better understand like what you're doing. I kind of didn't really understand what my parents did, other than my mom, like a bartender. That's like really easy to understand. But my dad, like worked in torpedoes, and I didn't really understand that until high school. So all this time, just like, yeah, my dad travels. So like involving your kids in what you do. Can my son talk days upon days about like periods and hormone health? No, but he at least knows like what a tampon is, a pad is, and like what the period products are. So if somebody needed help, he could support that. And then also like they get to learn fun skills like how to neatly pack a box and like how to organize and categorize things. And I even had him at one point look up YouTube influencers for periods and like gave him specific keywords to use to find them, and he gave me a list of them. So it can be fun for them to a point. Just listen to them and read their bodies. Like if it seems like they're not having fun with it, then let them go have fun and play. But I think being able to involve them in some of what you do is going to be really helpful in helping you not feel guilty about living your dream.
That's awesome. And I read actually a really interesting parenting book that talks about additional responsibility and how a lot of other countries involve their children in the family business or the family work, and how that can actually reduce a lot of behavioral issues and friction. Just having not everything being the guilt of having everything being child-centered, rather than showing them all of these different experiences and environments. And personally, my parents both of their jobs, they took me around. My dad farmed and my mom did theater. So I went to like play practices with her as a small child. And it was so, so cool most of the time, to be involved in those things. And it just like, this is a part of their work. And I can say from the kid perspective, it had lasting impacts on me to be around those environments, which I really enjoy. So that's an awesome tip out there. I think for me, I would end on, you kind of hearkened to it earlier in the episode, but I will directly quote RuPaul: unless they're paying your bills, pay them bitches, no mind. Like, you don't have to share anything. Your family gets to work for you in the way that makes sense. It's not really anyone else's concern about it. And attempting to unlatch yourself and letting as much of that roll off your back as possible, because maybe no one will ever understand it, and that's okay. It makes you need to be safe. Your kids need to be safe. Everyone's happy and healthy and taken care of. And beyond that, the way that structure works, it doesn't really matter if it makes sense to other people. It just needs to make sense for you. So an invitation to explore what routine feels really supportive to your family unit.
And to piggyback off of routine, like know that you're not alone. Being an entrepreneur and starting your own business, or even like working your way up in your career, can begin to feel isolating, because as you gain more responsibilities, the less that people can relate to you sometimes. But you're not alone. Like, I'm so happy that I know Alyx and that I know other periodpreneurs that like we can relate to with each other. And then I'm glad I know like people locally here that have their own businesses and, you know, things that they go through, their successes and struggles. So make sure you find like and build a community that you can lean into. And then outside of that, just know that you're not alone personally either. Like you have someone, at least one person in your life that wants to be there for you. So don't forget that you can lean into that too.
So good. What a perfect note to end on. Absolutely. Find your people and give them a big squeezy hug whenever it's possible, virtual or otherwise this year. We all definitely need each other. So lean into that connection. So
Yeah.
awesome.
It's
Awesome.
so good to know you, and it's so good to like have all you listeners. So thanks so much for listening. And if you would like to be a guest, please don't hesitate to reach out at podcast at shedtheshame.co. We will be doing weekly episodes. We'll have a fun surprise guest that'll air, I think, next week. So our episodes air every Friday at 11 a.m. and you can listen to them wherever you listen to your podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever. And until then, keep shedding that shit. Take care, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.